Thank you for inviting me. This is my first visit to TIS. I've always wanted to have a lot of interactions with social sciences people. The talk I want to give today is how British Orientalism and colonialism, while it's gone, it has been replaced by another kind of Orientalism, which I call American Orientalism. And the British Empire transferred across the Atlantic. So now we have an American Empire. So the sort of studies, the studies of the other that were previously being done by the British academics, a lot of those things are being done in a more sophisticated way by the American academics. And of course, the American academics have been much more successful in co-opting Indians into their scheme of things. The British were mostly Goras people doing this kind of work. They didn't have so many brown-skinned people on their team. The Americans are more sophisticated in bringing others into the scheme of things. So this makes it more complex and more difficult. And when I say American Indology or American, South Asian studies, I'm not using the term American as a race or an ethnicity or a nationality, but as a certain ideological lens, a certain viewpoint, and there are lots of Indians who are into that viewpoint. So I'm looking at more as a kind of the drishti, the perspective with which people are studying. The topic today has to do with colonialism and the return of colonialism. Colonialism has been sort of an elite enterprise, and previously it was British in cahoots with Rajas and kings and Indian elites, which we already know. Post-colonial scholars I've studied very carefully, they've done a very good job. But I feel the post-colonial scholars study the dead empire. They are not as courageous to study the living empire, because maybe many of them are funded by it. So it's easy to take people in the 1800s and criticize them and say we're doing post-colonial studies, but not that many are looking at today's continuation of the same perspective that goes on. So I decided I should do that. Of particular interest to me is the relationship between culture and power. So one of the persons I studied was Pierre Bourdieu, a Marxist, French Marxist. His theory on culture as a form of capital, cultural capital. The different forms of cultural capital, I'm sure many of you know this, and how it is used for power. And then I came across the theory of the aestheticization of power by Benjamin, one of the pioneers in the Frankfurt school of Marxism. Just to give you the background, because that's what I will talk about. When the Nazis rose to power, the Marxists were at a loss to explain why there hadn't been a communist revolution like there had been in Russia. Because in Russia, when the economy was so bad, people were out of work, people were starving, so there was a revolution to overthrow that. In France, there had been in the previous century the French Revolution. But in Germany, when the economy was in a depression, the question is why wasn't there a similar Marxist kind of revolution? Why is it that the elite didn't get overthrown by the grassroots people? They got replaced by a different elite. The Nazis were a different elite. So elite X is not overthrown but replaced by elite Y. They had to explain this. And the theory of aestheticization of power, I think, is a very interesting theory. I largely agree with it. I'll first explain it and then I'll tell you another way to apply the same theory. So the theory of the aestheticization of power says that that it is possible to project power in a way that you might think of as soft power. The Nazis were very good at projecting, nation, patriotism, marches, symbols, a lot of theater, lot of culture, a lot of arts, singing. So they were able to divert people's attention towards the aesthetics. In a very aesthetic way, they were able to project the power and prevent a overthrow, prevent the overthrow of their government. So it's sort of like Nehru has a debacle with China, and he has Tata in Red Fort singing Sare Jahan Se Acha. So that's the aestheticization of power. Everybody's got tears, we're so moved. Rather than saying, well, you let us down, let's overthrow you. Now we're all moved, so we are part of that. Or let's say the country is in trouble, so we have cricket match where we are winning, hitting sixers and all that. So everybody into this aestheticization of power. So good, it's like shining. So this aestheticization of power had been developed as a theory in the European context. I got interested in it and heard about it and learned about it through American Indologists, Sanskrit scholars, who use this theory to explain how Sanskrit spread in the same way. So Sanskrit spread not by violence. There was no army like Roman army spreading an empire, but Sanskrit spread throughout Southeast Asia and so many kingdoms. And for 1,000 years, it was the kind of elite system without any violence. The question is, how did it spread? So they came up with this theory that you can apply an adaptation of this aestheticization of power and explain the rise of Sanskrit. And the theory, the rise of Sanskrit as theorized by them is as follows. Sanskrit has unique qualities that can be used by the king for aestheticizing his power. He can project his power through kavya, display of Ramayana. The Ramayana says the king is divine, so the ruling king looks divine. Ramayana says the enemies are rakshasas, demons, so he can mobilize people to against his enemies. See? So the use of such devices is something very powerful in Sanskrit. And Sanskrit has, according to their theory, built-in system of discrimination and prejudice and oppression. So Sanskrit says these people can't use it, those people can't use it, and the ruling elite have a privileged access to this tool. So Sanskrit is sort of a development tool, the way you have software development tools. And in this development tool, you can develop all kinds of kavya and things like pageantry, nationalism, patriotism, and Sanskrit is unique according to this theory. So Sanskrit facilitates elitism, which helps power, and then for this reason Sanskrit got franchised. A yajna is performed, which gives the king divine status, and all kinds of kavyas are performed, which facilitate that, which further that. And so this is a mechanism of spreading power. And so hence there is a sort of conspiracy implied between the Brahmins as the technologists of this device, Sanskrit technologists, and the Raja, the kings in Asia, Southeast Asia, all over Southeast Asia, as the sponsors. So the king buys into this system, he sponsors the Brahmins, looks after them, and the Brahmins produce all this paraphernalia for the king becoming seen as powerful, and therefore the public is so aestheticized with this power, so mesmerized, so intoxicated, like the opium of the people, that they don't revolt. So hence hence the theory says Sanskrit was sort of franchise network across a large space. No other language and cultural system had peacefully spread across such a huge space for 1,000 years or more. So this is the term is given Sanskrit cosmopolis. A cosmopolis of many, many independent nations, all under the spell of Sanskrit. So this is the theory of the aestheticization of power. I actually don't have any problem with this. I actually like, even though I'm critiquing these people, but I think they have, it's a very interesting theory. It's quite an interesting theory. So, as I often like to do, I sort of played around with this theory to see what else can I do with it. And I realized that the very same theory can be applied back on them. So, these Indologists are aestheticizing power, their power. Now it's American power, it's Anglicized power. Now, one of the terms developed by people who came up with this theory is called literarization, with an extra "er". Literization is literary. You just know how to read and write. Literization. But if you add an extra R-A in it, literarization. So it's not literization, but literarization. That is when the technology of language goes beyond literization. So it's not just knowing how to read and how to write ordinary things, you know. It's not just a matter of ordering a cup of chai or having mundane conversation, talking about cricket and whatnot. Literalization means that you have taken the language and you have what they call infused it with structures of power. So there is literization when the language is just useful for reading, writing, common, aam aadmi's common talk. And literalization is an elitist weapon of power because the language has now been infused with structures. So the structures of Brahmin power over others, the structures of king, being the divine, the structures of enemies having to be killed, all these kind of structures got infused. So basically these people show that there was earlier simple Sanskrit, and then this became infused with all these structures, and then that's the age of literalization. And that's when, so there is literalization, and then aestheticization of power, and then this power spreads, this stage of development, and there is evidence given how in one kingdom after another it went through this pronounced. So, consistent with that, right now I'm developing this theory of the Americanization of Indian elites. That is what has to do with recolonization of India. The Americanization of Indian elites also involves literarization of English. Literary Sanskrit was easy, people could read, but literarization meant you had to understand certain structures, certain theories, certain siddhant, which most people couldn't understand. So, because the elite had access to these structures, and therefore they could use these technologies of language, it gave them power. So, I claim that the Americanization includes language, which is literalization, but the literarization of social theories being injected, infusing the English language with social theories of a certain kind, gives it a certain power in the hands of those who know these social theories. So somebody doesn't know, common person doesn't know these theories, the theories may pertain to him, they may be explaining him, describing him, but he is not able to talk because he doesn't understand it. These theories are very high flown. You go to very high-class universities in foreign countries and get degrees, and if you don't manage to do that, then the next best thing is you bring some people from there who come back and they teach you, and you climb up the ladder. So the lowest is the student who's consuming all this, and they have to prove that they've understood it in order to advance, and then gradually they publish in journals that people trained in this way are teaching, are moderating, and they are the peers and adjudicating. And then gradually you climb up the ladder, and one day you may get to visit there or get a degree there, and one day you may even get one of these literary awards, and somewhere along the way you go to Jaipur Literary Festival. And there is a certain aestheticization of power. So now this group of elites who know this lingo, they can talk about all these sophisticated things. I consider this to be unstudied, undiscovered, or unstudied, untalked about aestheticization of power of the Indian elite in this age of Americanization. And the social scientists have a role in this. And they're not the only ones. I mean, I come from technology background, corporate background in the past, and I think people of that kind also have this baggage. They're also part. So we are part of this, in this globalization, there's also globalization of social sciences, globalization of capital, globalization of all sorts of things. But there are certain nexuses which are hubs of all this. So, to the question I keep asking is, to what extent is is our elite infused with, literalized with this kind of new structures that are born somewhere else and consumed here, they're franchised here. Those who have certified and licensed to come and teach are very privileged. You know, like you could get a Pizza Hut license, you could get a license to teach a certain theory because you're certified and you've got this degree from somebody. It's certified, so it gives you status. How is that really different from the Brahmin elite we're talking about earlier? So this is very interesting because not only is the sponsor the Western foundations, funding mechanisms, some with CIA links, even now. I mean, they keep getting discovered. I mean, it's a free world. Everybody has a right to use their money and promote, and CIA has its rights, and we have a right to talk about it. Okay, so they have a right to do what they do. We have a right to talk about it. It's not only just that; it's also Indian entrepreneurs, Indian billionaires who look for a seat at the table. One way is you go give $50 million to Harvard, you are now in the inner club of your kind of honorary white. Or you give $25 million to Wharton or something like that, you're part of the ruling elite. So you earned a place there, and part of the role you play is that you represent that same game here. So now you've got a kind of franchise. You've got this franchise, you're playing that game. So this loyalty towards, so the intellectuals co-opted in India have to be loyal to the system in terms of the theories, language, literalized structures, aestheticization of power, loyalty to their sponsors, and their career depends on how good a job they can do. And then they are looked after, they're taken care of, it works both ways, so you're loyal to this scheme, loyal to you. If you're a rebellious type, you're given ammunition to rebel against your civilization, to say that that's the problem. So you're turned around into that mode. You're discouraged from looking back and saying, what about the blacks there, what about the Hispanics there, in your own country, before you export solutions to us, why can't you cure yourself? You see? So that would make you a kind of dangerous person to be sidelined. So there is a invisible collar people are wearing. We have a system called invisible collars, invisible fence in the US. I have a dog. So instead of putting the dog inside the house and on a leash, or the other option of just leaving the dog open and go running around the street. But there's this technology, they put a little chip on the collar, which doesn't do anything. And they put a wire under the perimeter that you want the dog to stay in, and is connected to the electrical thing. And if the dog tries to cross, you get a shock. So I asked this fellow, how cruel is it? And they said, no, not cruel, don't worry. And I said, how do you train this dog? My dog is a very loving dog, I don't want to do this. They said, don't worry. You go away for 10 minutes, we train the dog. And what they do is, they put flags as visual markers. The dog is so smart, it begins to associate those flags with this chuck. So once they take the dog to the fence, and 2 feet away, it starts giving a gentle bzzz kind of signal. And then once they cross the fence, and the dog gets a shock and yells and screams, very painful, and the dog, then they take the dog to every flag, not crossing it, no shock, but just within 2 feet, and the dog hears, he gets a buzz and wants to come back because he associates that this buzz. So first he associates that this buzz will lead to pain if I continue. Then he gets the idea that where the flags are is where this line is. So they say you keep it for 3 days, then you can remove the flags, this dog will never cross. Never even get pain, never cross. This is called the invisible, I call it the invisible fence syndrome. And I think a lot of Indian elite are wearing this collar. They know the line not to cross. They don't have to be physically held back. They just know, if those flags have been put there, they just know कि अच्छा ये glass ceiling है, यहाँ इधर रहेंगे ठीक रहेगा. We be looked after, we get good food, we sometimes bag our tail, and be happy. But we better not cross this. So I think there is this technology of invisible fence that a lot of Indian elites are in. ठीक करेंगे आपको जयपुर लिटरेरी फेस्टिवल में 5-star ट्रीटमेंट मिलेगा, वहाँ बहुत एस्थेटिक होगा. You had 20-year-old single malt, 18-year-old line जाएगी. People don't know the difference between one and the other. I called some of these guys to my house and I said, I'll give you a whole case of this 18-year if you can tell me one versus the other. I will do a blindfoldness test. I had a friend of mine who knows about all these things. I don't know about all these things. So I said, you bring all these favorite things that these guys have, and let's see if any one of them can tell the difference if you don't tell them what is what. And they really can't tell. It's all shoshagiri and kind of aesthetics of power. It's just style, fashion, who's high class, who's got more thappas on his passport. In India International Center, I sometimes sit and people are comparing who got more thappas on his passport, and, telling stories about I went there, it's all showing off to the other elites, basically deep complexes. So this is how elitism works. I mean, this is how royalty worked all the time. So this business of this aestheticization of power and recolonization through this kind of elite involves control of communication channels. One of the allegations made against the elite Brahmins is that they controlled communication channels. Others weren't allowed. So they controlled communication channels. So getting in was the gate to power, the route to power, but not everybody could get in. So today it's similar. I mean, I cannot get myself into mainstream media, and I don't care whether they criticize me or not. They prefer to just ignore. Ignore. I keep when the Hindu attacked me last year, I called a lot of people. They would ignore me. I said, I just want the right to rebuttal. You can write, I will write. We'll have a discussion, conversation. Why is it a problem? They wouldn't. They were silent. And then someone introduced me to Ravi. He's the brother of Enron. I met him last week in the private gathering, him and his wife Sudha. They're really wonderful people. So I told him my whole matter, and he was shocked and surprised at the information I was giving him. He said, this is very interesting that you're telling me all this should come out. Yeah, this is a very legitimate site, nobody knows. And I can't do anything but because Malini runs the editorial stuff nowadays, so I sent it to Malini, and I sent a note, and maybe she will do something, and Malini, of course, decided not to do anything. So this control of channels, whether it is one-sided media, whether it is literary festivals, whatever. That's why I'm very happy you are here. I'm really very happy. It is not important whether you like, dislike, criticize. We ought to have conversations. Indians should be able to talk to each other. You know, one thing I'll tell you, difference between Indian discourse and American discourse is, Americans, no matter how much they disagree with each other, how much they're opposed to each other, they'll go and play golf together. Yeah, they have that kind of a culture also. They'll go to the bar, have a drink together. They'll even chat. They'll also be friends, personal friends. You'll find some husband is on one camp and wife is on the other camp, and very opposed in their profession. So they're able to professionalize. Part of this aesthetics is there's an aesthetics of professionalizing your point of view, and it is nothing personal. Very interesting. I learned this in the corporate world. I learned that sometimes these bitterly fighting lawyers who were part of the same organization. They would go and have their fun together. They would go on holidays together. But in the courtroom, they would really fight like cats and dogs. That ability we don't have. We just take it too personally. We just become literally enemies of each other. This is very sad. Why can't we just disagree and say, okay, you have a point of view. I don't agree with it at all. I have a different point of view. And maybe we'll argue, maybe we learn a little bit from each other. And maybe at the end of the day, we'll still remain opponents. But we can be friends, we can still play cricket together. We can still, call each other fine in a nice, amicable way. We don't have that. In India, it's sort of hostility in a bitter hatred, kind of literal hatred kind of way. And I wonder to what extent it's part of the influence of colonization that will be turned into this hatred mutual, one king being made to fight another king and things like that. It's in our past to sort of go after each other. And to what extent we are encouraged to do this. So, I will, I'll just make a couple more points. Um, this idea is beyond left and right. There's nothing leftist or rightist. I think both these so-called wings are part of this aestheticization of power. I find a lot of people, since the new government came into power, a lot of people there are sort of like that. Talked about it. I mean, some have changed, some are always like that. So it's not a criticism of the left. It's a criticism of the elite of all kinds. The Indian elite have this complex of Americanization, like in the earlier times it was British Anglicization. Previously it was the guy who played polo and his son would be sent to Cambridge and he would marry some white woman and they would give this 21 gun salute, he'd be on an elephant. This was the aestheticization of power. Now these things are not done, but more Americanized things are done. The American equivalent of such things. And by the way, there's nothing un-American or anti-American for me to be saying this. I find that the interest for such discussion is huge in the United States compared to India. Because people here are afraid, wondering, kya hoga, kaise bolega, kaise bolega. But in the United States, there's a large amount of people who do this. Blacks do it, Hispanics do it, Chinese do it. There's a large Islamic studies people who do these things. But I would say the blacks are the ones who've done the best job. And then Hispanics, Latin American type people have done a tremendous job. And now Chinese they have this lot of studies of this sort that they are sponsoring. So the Chinese proudly say that China studies is run by them, not by the Americans. The journals are in Mandarin. They are located in China, the best journals. Their editorial boards are staffed by their people. The conferences, the doctorates. If you want to be a scholar, you got to be in the good books of the Chinese. It's not like the Americans have to certify who's a Chinese scholar. The Chinese have to certify who is a Chinese scholar. Japan studies here. The Americans have tried to control some of the journals, but there's always resistance. Similarly, Arabic studies, Arabs are very solidly in control. It's in their language and they're the adhikar, they have the authority and they'll tell you this is right, wrong. Of course, Westerners are always studying them. Nobody can be stopped. But the self-study of the Arabs is in their own terms. And similarly, the Iranian study and Persian language studies is in their own terms. So, for some reason, I mean, for obviously the reasons you guys know, the history of colonialism has been such that the study of India has been controlled from the outside. And I would say I often say India is the largest civilization whose study is controlled by the outside. And it hasn't changed. It was acceptable, accepted, I mean, it was reasonable during the British time, but things probably have gotten even worse. Because Indians are enthusiastic about being part of the American machinery. So I work with some of the Latin American type people. I'm interested in China people. There's one Tu Weming. His name is Tu Weming. He's at Harvard, but there he's it's an outpost, but he's really a Chinese guy in the Chinese university system. And he talks about the Chinese alternative to the Western modernity, Western postmodernity, Chinese counter to Western universalism. And these kind of things are very big in China. And they're rediscovering their Confucian past and their Taoism. And they have a Chinese Buddhism, very proud of that. Their problem is not with Buddhism, but with the headquarters being outside their country. That's their problem. Falun Gong and all these kind of, those East Asians are very concerned about any such movement being based outside, whether it's in New York or in India or anywhere like that. It's not with the ideology that there's any problem. So, I think that the rise of China is a very good thing from the point of view of studying these points, these problems, these issues. Because if there weren't China, I could not give a good role model of non-Western success, somebody hanging on to their non-Western identity and being very proud of their non-Western civilization and history, and yet being able to compete with the West on every front. The rise of China gives a good example for Indians, because if they weren't China, if you said, okay, West is like this, they would only look at, okay, there's a westernization option, otherwise backwardness, primitiveness, our own culture. So that was the two-way option. But now you can show that both China and Japan are great examples of non-Western modernity. Once I was on a committee where there were Chinese, non-Chinese people, Japanese people, and their point was that they don't consider that they are tradition with West modern and postmodern. They don't consider that. There's one theater group, one fellow who runs a very famous Chinese theater group in US, in New Jersey, goes around everywhere. And he was telling me, he showed me slides. He said, this slide is traditional dance, Chinese. And he says, there's huge demand for this. I can sell any number of these shows because Americans want to exoticize us. And as long as I'm selling Chinese traditional dance, there's a lot of market for it. Then he said, this slide shows China modernity dance. He said they get nervous because now I'm trampling on their turf. Like, I have my own way of being modern. They're very concerned. They don't like it. It's, oh, okay, we think about it. It's not the real China. It's not like they tell about India. It's not the real China. Yeah, it's not. It's sort of like, the real China is the other one, the traditional. And then he says, when I show the postmodern, and he has whole slideshow on postmodernism, China postmodernism. He says, this actually scares the hell out of them because then they say, okay, now these guys are really taking over. So that's very interesting. Chinese self-reflection on this issue, on this, the point that I have been inspired by all kinds of these people. And I wish I could also find collaborators in the social sciences here because I could learn so much from the social sciences people who have formal training. I have lived experience, so I'm a kind of, you might say, anthropologist of American culture, in a sense. Having lived there, seen these sort of things. Basically, I also want to say that the Donald Trump syndrome, or whatever you want to call it, is important to understand. Because while you think it's about one man and he's whatever opinion you have, actually it's not about one man. The fact that he's so popular, so many people are supporting him, tells you what the real American people are like. Yeah. I mean, the fact that such a huge support comes for, and actually this support percentage-wise is understated because a lot more people will come out that are secretly not for the money to sort of come out to get. So that is under the surface, there is that. So you have to keep that in mind. Why is it there? Why does it pop out in times of distress, times of tension? Why is there xenophobia? What is going on? And you have to study the history of whiteness in America. When you study the history of whiteness, it's the history of America. Because America is land of immigrants. Different countries brought immigrants in different ways. First from here, then there, then there. And they came under different circumstances. The blacks came under different circumstances than other people did. Indians very recent way. So each wave of immigrants had to negotiate with whiteness. Whiteness is not about skin color. It's a certain brand, identity, way of life, sense of who we are. To understand whiteness, you should read a book called How the Irish Became White. How the Irish Became White. Very interesting book, which shows that when the Civil War ended and there was no more slavery allowed, blacks could go out and get free jobs. So obviously they were undercutting the wages of whites because these blacks were able with lesser salary. They were now able to work. So whites organized unions, white-only unions. There's no law against a union saying we'll exclude them. So white unions in different skills, you might think of them as castes in a sense, because they're all profession oriented and they're by birth white. So these white only unions control the labor market, and they would get these union contracts so to keep blacks out. For a very long time it went on like this. Now, Irish were in a peculiar situation. Obviously they're not blacks, but Ireland was colonized by England. So when Irish immigrants came to the United States, the Englishman who was running the show in a club, in a white labor union, wasn't going to allow Irish to join as equal status. So Irish immigrants were excluded from membership in white labor unions. Therefore, they were not whites. That's in terms of job, in terms of labor, social status, they were not whites. They were white clubs, pubs, where it would say dogs and Irish not allowed. You can read up all this stuff. A lot of discrimination against Irish people. And then there was some violence went on in Philadelphia and other places in the 1800s, where Irish tried to physically get into these places. They were not allowed to. There was a lot of violence. And that is when it was decided that Irish should be allowed in the labor unions. And that is how the Irish became white from that point of view. And then there's another book, how the Jews became white folks, written by a Jewish person, Karen Brodkin or something, an anthropologist in UCLA, who wrote that until her grandparents' generation, they didn't think of themselves as white people. And so the point being that a new group has to negotiate, are we white? How do we become white? What does it take? Or are we non-white? If we're non-white, who are we? So blacks found the hard way that they are the only ones who cannot become white. It's not our option. Because the slavery, the baggage, the whole thing was so intense. They tried to become white and did not have their own civil rights movement. They let whites run the show of black rights. The whites were championing the blacks. They didn't have their own leaders. And they got burnt because during a big depression in the late 1800s, there was this Jim Crow, the Ku Klux Klan came up, all that started to kind of push them back. Because listen, we freed you from being slaves, but don't think you're equal to us. You must know how far you can go. So that kind of pushback happened. So then the blacks decided that we're going to have our own leaders. We have black power. We don't want to become whites. We will create a black pole of society which will demand its own stature. And they have done that very successfully. They're very proud to be. They have their own music, their culture, their fashions, their language. Now it's cool to be blacks. In fact, there's fashion among whites to do hip hop and all that and fake that they're blacks and all that because it's cool. So blacks have created this non-white space. Hispanics are confused. There's a big argument among Hispanics, are we white or not? And you find those who think that this whole Hispanic movement is not good, they should assimilate. And you can't even tell because they look like whites and they can't tell, but many of them are Cubans or from various Latin American backgrounds. And then you find the Hispanic movement, the marker they're hanging on to is language. The Spanish language is the marker, having it as an equal second language, gives them the stature as a separate, distinct community. So with the blacks as certainly a pole against resisting whiteness, and the Hispanics sort of in that mode also to a large extent. We have a very interesting dynamic. The question is, what happens to people like Indians? So one of the books I'm writing is how the Indians are becoming white. This is about elitism, about Indians wanting to join the club. It is about Indians wanting to think they're white or almost white. Their application is pending, it will come through one day. This sort of a thing. Deep complexes that Indians have. This is the complex of some of our billionaires trying to set up these institutions, so on, over there. So elitism here is linked to the diaspora elitism and complexes also. This goes on. So I could go on, but I just think that maybe we open to some questions. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I have please wait. Don't jump there. You have a mic.
You also need a mic here for people can.
Sir, you narrated about the elites in America to become whites or honorary whites. But in America, there is also a large number of movements like American Hindu Association, which propagate ideas of Hinduism, and I get quite a lot of memes on the internet. So how do you find their roles? Don't they?
So let's talk about religion in America, because I think people in India have a very limited understanding of religion in America. This is something I learned, because in India I didn't have a sense of religious identity. We believed in, or we did all kinds of things, and we had, my father comes from a very westernized background, my mother comes from a very traditional Hindu background, and I went to St. Columba School, and most of my friends are from childhood of various kinds of faiths. So, you know, we didn't have the clarity of identity, religious identity, as I found to be in the United States. In the United States, it's very proud to say I'm Presbyterian. The other person on the table will say I'm Methodist. My father was Episcopalian, like that. I mean, a particular denomination. And also, to some extent it is because their religion is by membership. You are a member of Rotary Club, or you're a member of Gymkhana Club in Delhi. And so you're a member of an organization, religious organization, who's pledged allegiance to it, and you are upholding the bylaws of that religious tenet. So it's not a free-for-all that one day you go to Presbyterian church, another day you go to Methodist church, and if you're driving around you celebrate there. It's not like that. So the idea of formal religious membership is very strong, religious identity is very strong. Jews fight that you should not put this Christmas tree in a government building because it violates separation of church and state. Jews are very strong on that. And if you do it, then you should also put Star of David, like that. Muslims also assert. So in America, religious identity is a very common public thing. Even the most liberal left-wing presidents are very clear about being Christian. Jimmy Carter, you would consider to be one of the most liberal left-wing presidents. You read his autobiography, he says all his decisions were influenced by his Christian faith. And he's so deeply devoted, so committed to Christianity. His now retired life is as his pastor in a church where he goes and preaches Christianity. Bill Clinton, in his autobiography, 200 pages of growing up as a Methodist, as a Baptist. Hillary Clinton, exceedingly. Barack Obama, you look at his speech when he announced that he's running for president, it was on the footsteps of his church. The equivalent would be a CPM candidate going to a major, which is a big temple in Bombay, what would we need? Mahalakshmi temple steps and saying, I am going to sit for my election. Okay, so the extreme left, as left as you can get in America, okay, by their standards, has no qualms about their religion. So leftism is not about, denouncing your religion. And secularism just means institution of church and institution of state cannot be mixed. Which means a lot of ours takeover of temples or funding some religious thing here there is actually not secular because it is being mixed. So in the American idea of secularism, And I'm giving you a background, so I'll come to Hindu foundation, but I want to give you this background of American religion so you understand in what context the Indian has to negotiate its place, so you should understand that. So, in the American context, liberalism, being leftist and so on, is a social economic posture. It's against capitalism, it's against concentration of power and wealth, it's for labor unions, it's for poor. It's got nothing to do with anti-religion. That is a peculiarly American thing. It's not the same in Europe. In European liberals are not so Christian, but American liberals are, by and large. Few Noam Chomsky type are considered beyond the edge. And that's another interesting thing. In India, a very extreme liberal will get a lot of space in the mainstream media. He will be called in as an expert on every opinion. But in American media, you will never find Noam Chomsky interviewed on television. I've never seen him ever interviewed on television. He's an academic guy. He's in the cocoons. He's in the cocoon he's a brilliant man, no doubt. But he's not the mainstream left, right, here. They have no time for these intellectuals sitting in the academy. America does not respect its left-wing academic, I'm underlining that, people like India does. They're just out of the pale of discourse. So being a liberal left-wing person in the mainstream politics and in the mainstream media is a social policy and economic policy. It is not about that far out to the fringe. So you should understand that. Now, in a place like that, religious studies is taught in schools. There is the American Academy of Religion, which is the faculty and research scholars in universities whose job is religious studies. There's a curriculum called religious studies in every major university department. One of the biggest departments in the humanities is religious studies. The American Academy of Religion has 10,000 plus members who are all faculty and full-time. Not somebody with an interest, not some guru type person. I'm not talking about those people, not the local priest. I'm talking about academic scholars, more than 10,000. So it's a huge discipline. Religion is a very big field in America, both academically, in public life, in political life. It is not considered to be right wing and all that. Now there is a religious right, hyphenated, religious right. But there's also a religious left. Like I gave you examples of Jimmy Carter and Obama and so on. So being Christian, being Judeo-Christian, you can be left-wing or right-wing and you can still be Judeo-Christian. So it is a very American thing. It is not one camp only. It's all across the political spectrum. Blacks, very liberal, very left-wing, very against all the white oppression, very much against social oppression, all that stuff. But they have black churches, very, very solid black churches. That is a center of power. They go to the church, black church, Christian church. So the majority religion, which is Christianity, occupies that kind of pride of place in the American heart across the whole political spectrum. It is not like in India where you will be considered saffron and right-wing if you're a Hindu. If you're a Christian, you're not considered right-wing automatically. You may be a Christian right, but you could also be Christian left. So when you look at it from that point of view, you have to then look at, there is a Council on Islamic Education. Every religious group has its political lobby in Washington, every religious group. And so it's perfectly fine if Hindus have Hindu American Foundation. I'm not a member of it and I'm not part of it, but I can see what they're doing. They're lobbying for a particular American, in the American political scene, they're lobbying for a point of view. And there are similar lobbies for every religion. And there's no reason not to. For instance, I'll give you examples of what they are lobbying, which is important. There is something called U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. United States Commission on International Religious Freedom was signed by Bill Clinton because he needed some votes from the other side to pass some bills. And one of the deals, they always make deals. One of the deals was that the religious right said we'll get you the support, but you have to pass this law. So he passed this law, and in his whole autobiography, there's just one sentence on this law. On such and such day, I signed the International Religious Freedom Law. And he goes on to the next topic. He didn't want to talk about it, but he signed it. So what this law says is, a commission is set up, which reports to the President and the US Congress every year, monitoring the state of religious freedom in every country in the world except the United States. Monitoring the state of religious freedom in every country in the world except the United States. And its recommendations will be based on its recommendations, you can put sanctions and you can do all kinds of things against the country. Okay? So, there has never been a Hindu on that. There's one Hindu who joined and left quickly. There are 15 members. They are Judeo-Christian, all of them. I think Muslims now got 2 or 3 people in there. So this is a kind of a lobby issue. Why is it that they have the authority, official under the government, to do this monitoring of all the countries in the world except the United States? And the people you are monitoring are not represented. I mean, it's undemocratic. In democracy, all segments of society are represented in a body which is going to have oversight over them. So if this body is going to have oversight over various religions, then in proportion to the representation of those religions all over the world, because if it's a global eyes and ears, then they should take a global look at how many people are of various faiths, and they should give some representation to those people. At least there should be one from each major religion. But there isn't. So they're lobbying for this. And they are highlighting the hypocrisy. In my book, Breaking India, I've written a whole amount on this US Commission on Religious Freedom. I went and attended their events. And it's all sham, complete sham. So there are legitimate issues. Now, I have problems when an organization like that gets involved in Indian religious politics, because if it's perfectly fine, you're living in the United States and you want to look at the American scene on religious freedom, the American rights of this group or that group, and you as Americans want to lobby for your side because that's the American way. American way is to lobby. America doesn't have castes but has lobby groups. Our castes are called lobby groups now, more or less. And there it is just considered fine. It's not a problem, it's considered the American way that you lobby. So there are lobbies, religious lobbies. There are all kinds of religious lobbies. And I don't see anything wrong. I disagree with them on things. I disagree when they get involved in something happening in India or wherever. Because if it's the Hindu American Foundation, then I think they should be looking at issues in the United States. They also look at things like textbooks. Textbooks have issues. And so I think you cannot openly accept everything or sort of have a sweeping rejection of everything they do. I would say that you got to look at each issue. What are the issues that they are working on? And a lot of those are very good issues. I mean, I'm not a member and I haven't been involved directly, but I look at what they're doing and I think some of those things are fine. Next question.
The gentleman with the mosaic shirt sitting there, the corner standing up.
Oh, mosaic. Can you put it on this because it will be better.
Yeah.
Give us your name also.
My name is Rajiv. I'm a PhD student.
You can sit down and speak. Don't mind.
Sir, here. Sir, I have 2 set of questions.
Yeah.
The first one is that you have proven charges of plagiarism against you by your own publisher.
Proven no.
By your own publisher.
Proven no.
Yes, the publisher has accepted and they said that they will remove the pages of the plagiarism from the book.
So let me answer. May I answer?
Is that your question? You have asked your question or are you? This is not an interview.
Can I answer the first question?
That was the first question.
But
This
can
is
I
not
answer?
an interview, not an interview.
First question.
No, but let me answer the first question. Let me answer the first question. Let me answer the first question. Okay. I knew it is coming and I'm very glad it came because in India they refused to give me a chance to talk on this. So now I have my chance and we are on camera. So I will read out the notes I discussed with Ravi of the Hindu, and he was so impressed. He said, "Send me all this. We ought to have this published." Of course, he couldn't convince Malhotra to publish, and we have correspondence, him and me, over this. So I'll tell you what I wrote to him. First, plagiarism is a charge of theft. So if somebody steals your stuff, you take it to court. I challenged them to take me to court earlier, and I still challenge them. And I'll tell you why they haven't done it and why they won't do it. Also, if it's a problem between two American entities, one American who claims he has intellectual property and the other he claims has stolen his intellectual property, then why is it that there is zero coverage in the American media on this issue? Why is it that Indians are obsessed? Why is it that so-called proof and all this has happened, which I will tell you is not happened because I have correspondence with my publisher. I have hundreds of emails back and forth I can tell you about. There's no such thing. Why is it that if the case is so strong, then the mainstream media is so afraid to let me speak because of what I might tell?
Absolutely. Yes.
So now let me tell you a little bit about the situation. And then I'll tell you about how the so-called Indian intellectual elite are quite dumb because they don't understand the argument. They go on somebody's reputation, somebody's branding. They go on suni sunai baat. Usne kaha hai to aapko ye honge. But they have no ability to think on their own. If I give you evidence, most of these guys I talk to can't speak, can't understand, don't have analytical, critical thinking skills. It seems like almost a crutch for them to say usne kaha tha theek hoga, usne wo kaha tha aapke bare mein. It's all smear, defamation, and who's able to get his message through. So it's all controlling the channels of that is what elitism is all about, and that is why they are colonized people. Large part of Indian intellectuals are colonized because they can't think for themselves. I am the defendant here. I've been accused of a huge crime.
Sir,
I have a right to defend myself.
Sir, excuse me, sir. I would like to intervene. This is not a cross-questioning session. We have opened up the floor for single questions.
No, wait a second.
This is not a public debate.
Wait, you don't have to say it because you're interrupting. Let me just complete my point. I don't have too much to say, but let me at least make my main point. Now I will tell you that a book was written by Nicholson. I don't know how many of you bothered to read it. Yeah, you accepted that something was stolen from that book, but I don't think you've read it, most of you. Yeah, I understand that. That is the name of the book, but have you read it? Because I challenged Andrew Nicholson. To tell me anything original in his book. If it is his property that I've stolen, then it has to be first of all his property, and I claim it is not his property. There is nothing original in that book. It is basically a paraphrasing and translation into English, into slick English, of things that Indian writers have written for the last few centuries. And most of these guys come here, they have a lot of money, they'll hire some pundits to translate things for them, they'll hire native informants to tell them things, and they will cut paste from here and there. And you can call it plagiarism if you want, but according to the American system, if you not use the actual words, you just plagiarize the ideas, that would not be called plagiarism. But if you look at plagiarism of ideas, there is not a single original idea, because they're writing the history of various Indian texts, and these texts were written long before any of these people were around. They have not even seen these original texts, they don't even know how to translate them. They've basically cut and paste prior Indian works. So what I did in the new, to prove my point, I told the publisher, I will not correct anything, and I will tell you what the errors were, and they were copy editing errors of a technical nature. I will come and tell you the details of how many, what errors they were, what they weren't, and why it doesn't qualify as plagiarism. I will come to that. But as a, or not revenge, but as a statement I was making, I said to the publisher, I will not correct any one of them. In fact, what I will do is I will replace the 10 pages of which was a summary of, it was a 10-page literature review. In your papers you do literature review. So I am doing a literature review of various authors. One of them was Nicholson, and I did a 10-page summary saying I'm doing a literature review of his book. That is not plagiarism when you say I'm doing a literature review of his book. And if you search the PDF of that book, for Nicholson, there are 33 references, or 33 times the word Nicholson appears. You do not plagiarize Nicholson and refer to him 33 times. You don't do that.
Unless you are
I'm about to finish. I'm about to finish. I'm about to finish. Outside, the original book is available. All you have to do is look in the index. May I please? All you have to do is look in the index and look under Nicholson and see how many times, how many pages Nicholson is there. And if a man wanted to plagiarize Nicholson, he'd be a fool to refer to him 33 times. Okay, so when I mentioned this to Ravi, who's a smart guy, he said, is that true? I said, yes, I'm going to send you right now, as we speak, I'm going to send you a PDF. I'll be on the phone to do a search and tell me how many times. And he was surprised. He said, nobody ever told us that. I said, that is because you guys, without due diligence, just because a white man said something, you believed it because you have an inferiority complex. I told him that. No, not yet. No. You gave me a chance, I'm taking the chance. So when Nicholson's book came out, there was a print run of 500 copies. No, but you give me, no sir, I've been told I'm a thief, and I've been told I've been proven to be a thief, and I have a right to defend myself. No sir, you can go out. No. We are going to talk about plagiarism because this is my forum on camera that you guys cannot receive a response with dignity because you just are used to parroting and shouting. Since you cannot deal with the work I do and cannot criticize and give a response to the substance of my arguments, therefore you are trying to insinuate, come up with these false allegations, and even when I respond to the false allegations, you don't have the decency to listen to my response. You made a very, very harsh and strong and powerful allegation, and I have a response. You called me a thief, and I have a response to defend myself. And I'm defending myself. Okay? Yeah. So when they published Nicholson's book, it was a print run of around 500. That's it. And when My Indra's Net came out with 32 references to his book, they did suddenly a print run of a few thousand because it became more popular. So if your property has been stolen, actually your value has gone up and not down. You have not suffered a loss. Even if somebody had stolen your property, to prove in court intellectual property theft, you have to show that you lost something, you lost value. And I would show that he gained value because I quoted him 32 times. So it was not. So now I want to tell you what happened. Please understand. In order to protect my publisher, I couldn't go out and say, copy editor made an error. I couldn't say that because it would be not the right thing, and I have a good relationship with my publisher. We're very close together, and on this issue and many other issues. We even decided that now is not the time to respond. Let my new book, The Battle of Sanskrit, come out, because every time there flare up issues to prevent this new book from coming out. Now that the book has come out, we decided, we had a joint agreement that the revised, where I've taken out Nicholson and replaced it with original Indian sources that he used, some with acknowledgement, some without acknowledgement. So I've taken out those 10-12 pages of Nicholson and put in the Indian sources where he got his knowledge from in place of it, and printed a new book. And this change of text from the old to the new, I'm going to put on the website of Indra's Net, so anybody who has got an old copy will be able to see what has changed. And in that change, I start out by giving a reason why I'm changing. Why I'm changing is that this, what I quoted was second-hand information. I'm giving credit to an American for things he did not do, and he's not satisfied that I've credited him 32 times. He wants 3 books. So according to them, there should have been 35 references, and there were 32. And that's called plagiarism. Okay? So plagiarism means that you wanted to hide that you wanted to hide that it is from him, and you wouldn't say it 32 times if that was the intention. Okay. So what happened is, if I don't know, can I have a copy of any book? I will show you how a block, yeah, just any book. No, okay. So I don't know if you can see this, but let me take a block quote and show you how a block quote can get lost in the main text. Let me just quickly find a block quote. I have so many of them, but when I need one, I can't find one. So here it is. Okay. So here is, I don't know if you can see it, but here is a block quote. Okay, so it's a block quote, which means that it's a quote, and according to some conventions, you put quotation mark on a block quote. According to the conventions of HarperCollins, if it's a block quote, you don't put you do not put a quotation mark. If you have, they'll remove it, and you indent it. You indent it so all of you, when you write papers, if the quotation is within the sentence, within the main text, you put it in quotation marks. If the quote is a block quote, you don't put quotation marks. So if this formatting were lost, if I had a 3-line, 4-line block quote, and the formatting were lost, and that indentation were gone, and it became part of the text before and after, it would look like I should have put quotation marks, which I didn't. Do you understand? Do you understand? Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes. I have a whole trace of versions I did and sent it for this editor, that editor, sent it back, this reviewer, that reviewer. Somewhere along the way, I decided certain things to change the sequence, copied a whole lot of pages, cut them, and moved them earlier or moved them later. And when I did the paste, that formatting of the separate paragraph was lost. And I do that mistake quite a few times. Quite often I lose the indentation. I don't know how many of you do that. When you do copy paste, sometimes the formatting changes. So this should have been caught, wasn't caught. So basically, what you find, which is considered plagiarism, is somebody else's Nicholson's text. After that, it says in parentheses Nicholson page whatever, but it doesn't have quotation marks. And in some cases, it puts an end note, and in the end note, it says something Nicholson page whatever, but it doesn't put quotation marks. And this is considered plagiarism. So I am sorry if this is the state of the Indian intellectuals. No, not only are you colonized, but you're really slaves. You're really slaves. And so what happened is, what happened is. So what happened is that there was a white man who wait, I am a defendant, I have to defend myself. But I'm giving a defense. I have been accused. No, you thought that मैं फंस जाऊंगा और आप फंस गए. Okay, बात ये है कि आप फंस गए.
Please.
Okay.
I will move to the next question.
No, wait a second. One more point. Richard Fox Young gave the impression that he's a Princeton University professor, which is not. None of the people in the Indian press bothered to verify, and these so-called intellectuals with academic rigor are supposed to verify the facts. None of them verified the fact that he has got nothing to do with Princeton University. He lives in a town with nearby, and he runs a Christian seminary. Nothing wrong with that. And he and I have had fights over a long time. So he thought कि ये बुद्धू Indians को बेवकूफ बनाना बहुत आसान है. So I will make a fool out of them by getting them to rally and support me. So basically, a person like that made an idiot out of some of you. That is what happened. Okay, and so in order to save the relationship with my publisher, in order to save their reputation, because they were getting attacked on social media for no reason, I told them, I'll take the heat, let my new book come out. When the new book comes out, then we'll print all this stuff about Indra's neck. So we are actually out there. We may even sue some of these people. For defamation. Okay, so I just want to tell you one thing. If you think you have a case of one American stealing from another American, then you should go to the US court and file a litigation, and I will file a litigation right back. And unless and until you can do that, you should keep your mouth shut.
Why did people outside are recording all these things? Why?
Because it is a public lecture. Public is supposed to enter.
Why you are so upset?
the second question. I'm happy that you feel powerful. No, I will ask Kamlesh sir first. You work with the university. Everybody has to keep, like, to maintain some decorum, some semblance of decorum. Right? She's afraid and she's shouting. I'm very glad. I'm very sorry that you're afraid. I'm asking Kamlesh. Yes. Mr. Kamlesh. Yes.
You cannot.
Mr. Kamlesh. Everybody, he's been asking Mr. Kamlesh. He's talking about high confidence. Be fair. We are going for a question, Mr. Kamlesh, please.
Yes,
I'm moderating, please. I'm moderating. How can you say that you're the first one? Ask whom? Ask whom? Ask whom? I'm asking you to speak. No, this will not happen. I will ask you next. You will not speak now. I will ask you next. Yes. Please, sir. Please, sir.
Rajiv sir.
Okay, let him speak. Let him speak. Let him speak. Let him speak. Please. बोलिए.
Rajiv ji, different question.
Really.
Does Obama administration or leadership
बोलिए.
reduce the violence against black people?
The Obama administration could not reduce violence against black people, but I don't think it is one man's fault. This is part of civilization. This is deep part of the American psyche. These things come out, and police is a certain way, and whites are a certain way, blacks are a certain way. I'll tell you something. I have a lot of black friends, a lot of Judeo-Christian black friends. They are very decent human beings on a personal level. They are very decent people. But under each of us got many levels. We don't even know our unconscious fully. And under certain moments of stress, gussa ho jata hai, that old baggage comes out. So there is that problem also. And blacks have suffered a huge amount. I mean, they deserve a break. I mean, this is enough. And this extensive, heavy-handed police brutality is kind of, it's really become a showcase of oppression in the United States. For a rich country to do that, I could see if they were all poor people fighting because they are poor and they have a lot of frustration and all that. But some of the rich neighborhoods have these kind of problems. I live in the town of Princeton, which is a very upscale, highly educated, elite kind of a prestigious town. But what many people wouldn't know is that a very substantial double digits percentage of the population are from Guatemala. They are underclass. They are immigrants, and they are huddled together in a few blocks. Huge kind of what you would call a slum, but by American standards, they're pakka houses and all that. They have heat and air conditioning and all that. But they are very huddled together, and they are the labor. They are the labor class in an elite town like Princeton. And so, we have these ghettos. We have Princeton right next to is Trenton, which is one of the highest crime and lowest economy kind of area. So, as a have, it is just that the overall lifestyle and standard and the wealth is so huge that even being poor is better than a lot of people in many other places. So, but the relative disparity is very large, and this violence against blacks and so on is huge. So, Obama ka jo effect hai, it sort of bringing Obama into power helped reduce white guilt. There is something called white guilt. कि भी अब हमने black को भी chance दे दिया. अब हो गया, एक बार हो गया तो ठीक है, अब we don't need to for the next 20 years. So basically, it's almost sort of like, okay, we're done with this. अब ये होगी बात. I don't think that as Obama leaves, years go by, other presidents will come. I don't think that blacks are going to say that we had a permanent shift in our status. I don't think it's a long-term, permanent structural change in American society. I just think that it was a good 8 years, and I'm very happy. I wish we could have more of these kind of things. But you look at the percentage of senators, 100 senators, mein kitne hain? Ek do. I mean, it's hardly you find. So this is a serious problem United States has. Let's take different kind of question.
I was not finished my question.
Okay, Muzaffer, the fellow with the side shirt.
Yes, please.
I will go back to the top as usual, as that's what you want to do. I was hearing this phrase of exercisation of power, and I felt that I am being injected with this phrase by you. Second thing is that you talked about how China is going back to the past, and how China is going back to the past. And you talked about various religious and cultural revivalism happening all over the world. With respect to India, I had not heard the word, the phrase, the sentences about Dalits and tribals specifically. Plus, how do you see dharma as? And as per your rating in your book, which I have gone through, it is clearly stating that dharma traditions are superior, and Abrahamic faiths are not equally valid. So it is clearly in contradiction with the notion of mutual respect that you brag in the whole, in all of the books that you have written about.
Yeah, I will write. So can I ask very good question. See, I like this kind of question. Tough question, but give me a chance to answer. So first is when I talked about aestheticization of power, you felt put on the spot, and I'm sorry, it was not intended to anybody personally. I feel I'm also part of this aestheticization of power. Maybe elite home. I mean, I have not. I gave up my business at the top of its success. I sold my companies, 20 of them, for $1 to the management. Did not put even one share into my family, and I decided I live on a pension based on the money I already made. So I stopped accumulating further and decided giving up. So, but I'm still part of the elite. May I please answer him? I'm still part of the elite because I feel I have more power, like all of you have. So if I say that the aestheticization of power applies to a lot of people beyond just the Nazis, which is what they were saying, and beyond just these Sanskrit people. I'm in it, you are in it, we are as elite have to shoulder that. Why are we afraid of saying हमारा भी problem है? Why are you into कि किसी और का problem है? Okay, then China, going back to the past, is historical fact. I mean, I'm not judging whether they're good or bad. This is historical fact. There is a difference between scholarship which is descriptive and scholarship which is prescriptive. In prescriptive, you're prescribing and saying ऐसे होना चाहिए था. Descriptive, you're just saying ऐसे है. चाहे ठीक है गलत है, that is how things are. So I'm doing a lot of my work is descriptive, and I'll come to this dharma versus Abrahamic. It is a descriptive rather than prescriptive scholarship I'm doing, but I'll come to that in a moment. So China returning to its heritage and its past is a descriptive. I don't know whether there is a good thing. I'm not even saying that. I'm saying that they feel empowered. They feel part of their nation building is to go back in history and have a historical continuity. A historical grand narrative of China is very important to them, and we do not have such a thing as a historical grand narrative of India. It's just a descriptive fact. Maybe you don't need one. Maybe you're better off than China. Maybe China is no good and we are going to come out ahead. Maybe so. I doubt it. But I'm just making a statement that this is what China's strategy is, that you should have a unified grand narrative of the greatness of China. Then religions are reviving. That's a descriptive fact. I mean, one of the things that happened when the Soviets collapsed is a huge rise of Orthodox Christianity and all kinds of Christianity. And now with Cuba, I mean, there's huge revival of Christianity there. When these oppression of religion is lifted, religion comes back with a vengeance. So people who are atheists have to ask the question: what is hardwired in the human brain? That in spite of education, because the Russians are very educated people. Chinese are very educated people. You cannot say that this is the sign of being primitive and backward. Unko padha likha denge, they won't be religious, because religion is superstition, and when people get educated and scientific, they won't need it. That is not the case. In fact, there are so many conferences that Templeton Foundation sponsors on science and spirituality, and Nobel laureates come, highly educated people come. So in India mein ye hai idea, which is kind of old baggage of old Marxism from 30-40 years ago. You got to update your Marxism to a more recent version, because the old baggage was that religion is oppressive baggage of the past and primitive and whatnot, and when you progress, padhe likhe honge, they won't believe in these things. That baggage still remains in India, but in other countries which are some of the most advanced educated countries, spirituality is in a big way. So this is a statement of, this is descriptive of what things are like. I'm not saying yes, you want to. Then this business of dharma versus Abrahamic. Dharma versus Abrahamic. My book that you are referring to is not Breaking India, but Being Different. There's another book. The whole book is contrast between the Dharmic worldview and the Abrahamic worldview. The Abrahamic worldview believes in historical exclusivity and historical uniqueness. Dharmic worldview believes in something else, which is a cyclical time and revival and new revelations and these kind of things happening all the time. So I'm giving every chapter, I'm giving a contrast between one view and another view, and I'm saying I'm standing in the Dharmic view and giving a view of the other. Now, whether I'm respectful or not, you know, I'll tell you this. I've had numerous discussions and debates with Christians who know a lot more about Christianity, including Jesuits like Father Clooney, Francis Clooney at Harvard. You should watch those videos, and he says this is among the most interesting and important analyses of the relationship between these two systems, and that every Christian should read this book. This is the kind of the endorsement on my book is from these people. So I recently had a debate with a Christian scholar in Houston. Some of you might have seen it. It's on the web. You should watch it. So I have no problem with the Christians when I'm having these things. They're inviting me to interfaith events. I just had one a few months ago. But India may, which kind of ignorance about religion and a kind of belief that you have to start out by hating. You have to start off by, to show your credentials, you go to an audience and say, okay, to prove that I'm okay, I pronounce my guilt as a Brahmanical Hindu and I'm guilty man and all my ancestors were guilty, and unless you do that at the very beginning and put your cards on the table, you are going to be accused. Ye India mein bimari hai. This is a problem. I don't find this reality.
Within the framework of mutual respect which you talk about, and when you talk about dharma, there is a notion of untouchability attached to it. So how do you deal with it?
No, wait a second. No, wait. So I want to tell you, I agree that there is discrimination. I'm not one of those who deny that there is discrimination. I have lived in a discrimination society in the United States for a long time, and when I come to India, I see discrimination here also. I see discrimination in most places I go to. Okay, so there is discrimination, social discrimination, cultural discrimination, financial discrimination. There is discrimination. I agree with that. So the question is, no, wait a second. The discrimination by the anglicized neo-Brahmins of today, who are social scientists in prestigious universities funded by the United States, is also a form of discrimination we should talk about. Okay. We should talk about how the adhikar or the discourse has shifted to a few people who are very elitist, who talk in a literarized language of social sciences which the Aam Aadmi doesn't understand. If you take your high-flown social sciences theories and you go to the village and tell them, they will think that you are some kind of a Firangi. Okay, so this is elitism also.
We are running on short time. Last
Okay, alright, so.
Sir, can I ask? In fact, the question or opinion which I am sharing comes from following your work as well as the pedagogy of the oppressed by those of us who are interested in social science or social psychology must read that book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. It beautifully gives an account of how oppressed keep thinking like they get sandwiched between the psychology of ruler and oppressed. That's what is happening with us. We want to project ourselves like ruler, but we are still shadowed by the the aftermath of. My question to you is, Mr. Rajiv, that the kind of
can you speak inside the mic?
yeah, you can see that.
Yeah.
Can you this observation or question is like this kind of the literalization or understanding, the very simple word understanding which you mentioned must percolate down to the multiple tiers of society. Then only what you are trying to convey will get conveyed.
Yes.
And to do that, do you think, there are two parts of this question. Do we need to come to what I can say language consciousness? Because we think that we know English, but we don't really understand. So that is
Yeah, my goal.
Second is that do you think that your work should also be available in Hindi and
Yes.
maybe in Sanskrit also?
Yes,
Like
yes.
books-
My works are being translated into Tamil, Kannada, Hindi, and now the Sanskrit Bharati people are going to translate this latest book into many 50-page small books, maybe 10 or 15 of them, into Sanskrit, because I believe that the system of Purva Paksh needs to be revived, where we debate with opponents. We debate with opponents.
we react without homework.
Yeah. So our traditional people need to understand Western thought about them. They are outsiders, and they need to give a response. So we'll have equal voice at the table. You see, you don't resolve these issues by shouting and accusing and blaming, like somebody start out by saying, you have been produced guilty, as if he's some Supreme Court fellow, talking to me like that. I mean, you have to learn to sit down and say, this is an allegation, what do you think? You have to start like that. First, dignity and manners is, you make a statement and you listen. So you see, what has happened is the whole Western ideology, the Western ideology is such that our people are not given a chance to respond. Our people have a right to respond, and they don't understand. Yeah. So this business of percolating the knowledge to lower strata is very important. And as the knowledge of the Indian intellectual elite, which includes social scientists, percolates to the lower strata, I am predicting that the lower strata will say, let's get rid of these guys, because these guys are elitists. They are brown-skinned, Americanized social science elites. And they are not people who are really part of our culture. They don't understand who we are. They just come up with foreign theories, and they are trying to make the Indian culture fit into foreign theories. So and I'm anti-elitist. And I'm finding that a lot of the people here are elitist, and I'm anti-elitist.
Mr. Malhotra agreed to sit with the students for a discussion over dinner afterwards. We'll just take a last question from the gentleman, the lady in front. They have come from Pune, so they will not be joining us for dinner. Okay, the gentleman. Okay.
Yeah, so we're together. Okay. He's my father. So, my question.
One only.
Please choose one.
Now, the left is trying to claim Ambedkar, and even you, I see your side as the dharmic side, right? And you have in your book Breaking India quoted Ambedkar several times to strengthen your argument. So, whose claim to Ambedkar is a genuine one?
Okay, the Ambedkar is a very interesting person because his original notes when he was in Columbia getting his PhD got destroyed. Do you know that? How many of, I don't know if you guys know that when Ambedkar was returning to India, there was one passenger ship he was on, and the cargo was going in another cargo ship, and the Germans torpedoed that. And so in those days there was no online record, computer record, no Xerox copy, there's nothing, no other record. His original diaries, notes, everything was destroyed. So a lot of what happened to Ambedkar in America, who sponsored him, who influenced him, what was he doing, what were his thoughts, those are the formative years of Ambedkar that are missing. So a lot of it's like archaeological evidence, that is historical evidence is missing. So some people are going through the Columbia archives to see if there is secondary evidence. Maybe some classmate wrote something about him, or maybe there's a newsletter or a talk he gave to try and reconstruct the missing years of Ambedkar to figure out more about him. I think he's a very important person. I don't think he's left wing, right wing. I think he's sort of an enigmatic person, and we ought to. He's one of the founding fathers of this country. He's a great man, and we ought to respect him and understand more about him. And maybe we find out he's a complex person. I think that it would be very difficult. It would be very difficult to characterize Gandhi as a left wing or a right wing guy. I mean, very difficult to characterize him. A lot of the things that if you were to take Gandhi's statements and delete the fact that it's Gandhi, make it anonymous, and ask a lot of people, they will say this is Hindutva, this is fascist, this is right wing. They talk like that because Gandhi made all kinds of statements about missionaries. He made all kinds of statements. In fact, Ambedkar made a lot of statements about Christianity and Islam that today would be considered communal. Okay, so they are left wing in some ways, right wing in some ways. I think what we have to figure out is whether these categories make any sense for us, and these may be imported categories. I don't know how many of you know what's the origin of left and right. That's nothing to do with our history. I tell people, I was in a conference in Salt Lake City, and Shabana Azmi was brought in as sort of an expert. I don't know why, but this was a conference on colonization, post-colonization, and some other things I've told you I've presented over there. And so she asked me, "Aap left wing hai ke right wing hai?" Because she heard me for an hour and she couldn't figure out what to do with this fellow. So I told her that left when the French Revolution, after that, the peasants could also sit in the parliament, and peasants didn't have cologne to hide their odor, because French people don't take a bath, and so they have body odor. But the aristocrats have cologne to hide the body odor. So the aristocrat didn't want to sit near this foul-smelling peasant. They would sit on one side of the aisle, and the peasants would sit on the other side of the aisle. And so they didn't know each other's names. They would refer to, when answering each other's questions, they would say in response to the gentleman on the left, and they would say in response to the gentleman on the right. This became known as the left wing and the right wing. So I told her, कि देखिए, हम तो रोज नहाते हैं, हमारा तो problem नहीं है. So if you take a bath, you don't need to be left wing or right wing, and you can be lying on both wings, and you don't have to have water. Thank you very much.
There are 20 questions people want to ask. We don't have time, we're running short of time. Sir will be joining us for dinner, so people can, if you actually have questions, you can sit with us and talk.
Now